Hi everyone, my name is Stacy Lederman, like Mark said, and I'm the senior producer here at See3 Communications. I'm really excited to do a second webinar for the AVI CHAI competition and the alumni series. I did another webinar for the first series on production, which I'll be pointing you towards later. But today we're going to focus on alumni engagement video and specifically storytelling. So today's webinar, we're going to go over using video to engage alumni. What makes a good story versus a video? I think this is really important, and we're spending a lot of time on this bullet point today because in the first round of the contest, we saw a lot of great videos that showed what schools are doing and got everyone introduced to using film equipment and feeling comfortable. But what we did not see is a lot of storytelling, and we really want to push every one of you and your alumni to look at video more as an art form and a way to engage emotion rather than just showing what's right in front of you. Then we're going to talk about how to find the right subject to tell your story. We're going to cover some production basics. It's going to be very short because we only have an hour today, and there's a whole other hour-long webinar you can watch on production. And then I'm going to cover 3 steps you can take away with you today. I'm going to try to zip through the first part of this presentation. We have 6 examples we're going to be viewing. Mark is going to be sending the links through the chat window when we're ready to have you watch the links, and you can just click on it. Each video is about 2 minutes long, and then when you're done, we'll have you answer a poll question so we can move along. So the first thing I'm going to ask is, why are you making a video? Mark is going to post a poll. Why are you making a video? I have something important to say. It's a new way to drive people to action, or I went to win the JD prize. You know, there's no right answer here. We just wanted to see where people are coming through. I think for me, I would have answered all 3, especially the last one. But I think what's interesting here is that 84% of you said it's a new way to drive people to action. And only 32% of you said I have something important to say. I think in order to drive people to action, you have to have something important to say. And so they really work hand in hand. It's not a trick question, but I just want to get us in that mindset of what video really is. My answer on the next card was communicate with alumni and drive them to action, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So before we can talk about storytelling, we have to talk about messaging. What is the messaging behind the story? They're really 2 different things. And I don't want to sound like a broken record here, and I know Michael Hoffman has talked about this a lot, and it was talked about in the last webinar. But before you say I'm going to make a video or investigate storytelling, you need to know what's the goal of your video. What are you trying to achieve? What's that action? Then you need to know who you're talking to. Who's your target audience? What are you saying to them? Following that, you need to know what you want your audience to feel or to do after watching it. So all 3 of those really tie into what's the goal. And then the last one, which is kind of a standalone, but I put it in here, is how will you distribute the finished video? That also relates to your action, because if you're going to say sign up to be a part of the alumni picnic, you have to have it on a sign-up page, and you have to have a form that goes with it. So the video sometimes as a standalone doesn't work. So let's run through these on a couple examples that might be relevant to everyone. Example 1, a goal, to get more people active in the alumni community. I think that's something we're all challenged with. How do we get newer alumni, older alumni, parents of alumni involved? For this, we're going to be a little more specific and just say our audience is alumni themselves and not the community or parents. The action is to get involved. I think I would take that one step further and say, how can you get involved instead of just get involved? Sign up for the e-newsletter, sign up for the picnic, be as specific as possible. And then this would be distributed through the website, social networks, and email. Seems pretty simple, but it's amazing when you get into figuring out your messaging and defining your target audience, how quickly this can be lost and how quickly that audience can become everyone. You know, for example, if I'm talking to an alumni, I'm not gonna talk to them in the same way that I would talk to a parent. They might get more insider joke information, or there's just a lot more information that's relevant to them. So our second example would be you can make a video to recruit new students. So this case, your audience wouldn't necessarily be alumni. They might watch the video, but your audience would be the broader Jewish community. And the action, again, goes with the goal, enroll. I might say find out more about how you can enroll or contact this person. And then the distribution here is a little more specific: community newsletter, open house events, website, and social media. Okay. And then our third example is your goal is to fundraise. You're using the video for a fundraiser. Your audience is existing school communities, so teachers, parents, the community at large, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone. The action is to donate. I think one strong thing here, again, I left this very vague, but asking a specific amount is usually good. And the distribution for this might be at a dinner event, it would be on the website, you use it through social networks and email. So that's our messaging, our goal, audience, action, and distribution message. Once you have that confirmed, you need to think about how you're going to say that. How are people going to pay attention and listen and take the action that you're asking them to do? So the next three questions you'd want to ask yourself is, what is the best type of story to support your goal? Who are the best people to tell that story? And what is the story theme? So I'm going to look at each of these individually on different slides, but like the messaging, they all three go together. So the best type of story to support your goal, there's all sorts of different mechanisms of storytelling. You can do a documentary where you're following someone around in their real life situation or doing a retrospective. You could use an animation. I believe one of the videos last year that won was an animation, or I definitely saw a couple animated shorts that were submitted and fun. Slideshow is a great option. If you can't get anybody on camera, you can use photos from the past and you can have them narrated. An introduction video could be something along the lines of, this is what our alumni network is about, and it's a little more informational. One example we're going to be focusing on a lot today is the first person point of view, POV is point of view. I think this is a really good way to connect people emotionally because you, as a viewer, as an alumni, let's say your target audience is alumni, can identify with that alumni who's speaking. So that you can see how that goes into the next question of who's the best person to tell your story. Testimonials are great just because, again, people can talk about how they've learned from your school or what they're doing now because of the education they've got. Historical, you could talk about how long the school's been around and paint an idea of how prestigious it is. And, or you could do something that's event focused. When I was researching examples for the webinar today, and I went onto YouTube and I typed in the word alumni videos, it was really interesting what came up. A lot of people just documented like picnics or an event in a mess hall, or just walked around and asked people, you know, why are they coming to a reunion? And it was all focused around events and just showing what happened rather than making a video to rally people to get involved. So I think documenting events are good for your library and good to go back to, but I just noticed this common theme of how, well, that was nice. I can see the people I missed at the alumni event or relive it, but it doesn't really serve a purpose beyond that. So those are the types of videos. Today, like I said, I want to focus more on first-person narratives and point-of-view stories just because they make for great stories, and everyone who's listening in has an alumni member that they can go back to and ask them to share a story. So who are the best people to tell your story? There are the alumni themselves, teachers, parents, the community, the school. And when I mean the school, it could be a narrator or your principal or your headmaster. All of these characters are unique, and all of them will have a different perspective, and who you choose will depend on the audience you're trying to reach. So if you want to reach parents of alumni, you might want to hear from another parent, or you might want to hear from the school itself or a teacher. Some alumni might bond more from hearing with the teacher than hearing from another alumni, but then you're also kind of putting yourself in a box where only certain year students can be able to relate to that teacher depending on how long they're there. But most importantly, besides the perspective, determining if you're going with an alumni or a teacher, is to find a character who wants to share their story and will stay committed to the project and will speak open and honestly, and who can also articulate and form sound bites for you, and that what they have to say and their goals and their ideals align with the school's mission. On the other hand, I want to say finding someone who's too good can sometimes be a burden because it can seem not authentic, or that the school is putting words in that person's mouth. So it's finding that happy balance. It's finding someone who's interesting and willing to open up. It can take time. I think a lot of times in schools, if you're casting by committee, let's say, one person on your team might really want to go with this alumni because they really talk about how important Sadaka is, or one person might want to go with another alumni because it highlights your science department and how great it is, or another alumni because they're a sports player, and how do you know what the right person is? And one way to really whittle down an answer to that question is say, okay, well, let's do pre-interviews with all of them and see how they talk and how they articulate their statements and how much access they're willing to give us, and if they have old photos. So instead of just taking a whole day to go and film, you can call that person on the phone, record the conversation, make it 30 minutes tops, even at that, and then everyone comes back and shares what they've learned and can really find who would be the best person for that story. So that's character, and once you determine your character, you need to think about a theme. I put a bullet point here that says the theme should really be the theme of your school. I think that's important because after doing consultations last year, a lot of people talked about, I want this video to represent who our school is and what our values are, and I heard that pretty much from everyone. And so I think this is a great way to incorporate that in. Not every kid has to state what your tagline is or talk about the theme of your school, but the actions that they take should represent that of your school. And we'll look at some examples and I'll walk through. That theme is kind of a little complex, and we'll be talking about it in and out of the presentation. So another way to think about theme is through the questions and visuals you ask and collect as part of your storytelling. So, for example, if you're doing a series of interviews with different alumni, you can ask all of them to state one fact. They could say something like, I am proud to be a C3 alumni because of X, Y, and Z, or being a C3 alumni means this to me. Or when I look at the C3 logo, this is how I feel. I'm just using that example because that's who we are. But another way is also visuals. I think, I kept thinking this idea where if you are a high school participating and you have a recent graduate who's just gone off to college, and if you could go and film at the college, or the person could film themselves, having them film their dorm room and seeing what's there, if they have a mezuzah on the wall, or if they have books on their shelves that really illustrate the ethics and morals and values of your school, and painting in visuals that really speak, instead of just having your subject say what it is and having a little more mystery to it. And we'll be looking at some examples that have that as well. And the theme is really just there to help drive home your message. It's just a different way to say it. So, like I said, today we're talking more about storytelling versus just making a video. Making a video means picking up a camera, filming what's in front of you, putting in editing software and getting it out there. It's filming someone who's talking and doing a presentation and doesn't really have a lot of production behind it. So that being said, I'm not saying don't pick up a camera and do that. We're just going to focus more on storytelling. Stories we're telling are ones where the what and the why of your story is thought through. It's an art. What's really important is there's no rules to it, but there are things to think about when you choose to tell your story. And we're going to look at different artistic ways to do this. And some of them could maybe be arguable to just be videos. And I'm happy to open that up to conversation if people want to Skype in questions about what differentiates a video from a story. So the first rule for any story is keep it simple. Best stories make complex ideas simple. Too much information gets drowned out. It's hard to follow. It's hard to create an emotion of empathy or excitement or anger or shock and awe because you're trying to pack too much in. I don't have an example for simple because all the examples I'm going to be showing you are simple. It's the #1 rule. So, you know, keep your story to one message, idea, and theme, everything we've reviewed. The viewer often misses the point you really want to make if you present them with too many secondary messages. And I did see that a lot in some of the other videos that were presented the last round. So I want to have everybody challenge themselves. So another rule is to inspire action. I have a quote here from C.S. Lewis that you can read. Miracles are a retelling in small letters of the very same story which is written across the whole world in letters too large for some of us to see. And if you've succeeded in getting someone's attention through a video, you need to take advantage of connecting the dots and showing the viewer how they can take action through your work to make the aspiration real. And don't forget that telling your viewer is not enough. You need to give them the tools to achieve the vision that you have. Make an explicit call to action and give them a link or other tools to make it as easy as possible to act. So Mark's going to Skype out a link to this video that American Jewish World Service produced, a call around the idea of what does tzedakah mean in modern day terms. And it has a very interesting call to action, and it's a great video. Some of you might have seen it, but it's about 1 minute and 30 seconds. We'll check back in 2 minutes so everyone has enough time to load it and watch the video. When you're done watching the video, please answer the poll question so we know to move forward.
Look online. Turn on the TV. Check the news. The world is struggling with many important issues. As our world becomes more interconnected, issues that once seemed distant and too big to tackle are now at our doorstep. Every culture has its form of charity. Tzedakah is Judaism's imperative to give money to those in need. For centuries, Jews gave tzedakah by collecting coins in a box. They gave their change to make a change in their communities. Today, our coins have turned into credit card transactions, and our dollar bills have morphed into digital donation buttons. Giving doesn't look like it used to. Perhaps it's time for us to think outside of the box. As we increasingly face global problems, our sense of community expands. How should we change the way we think about giving? How can we invoke an ancient tradition to inspire social change? How can we design a 21st century tzedakah box that connects us more deeply with issues around the world? What does this tzedakah box look like? Maybe it's not a box at all. Show us. Enter our design competition and help spark a national conversation. Where do you give? To whom? And why? Join us at wheredoyougive.org.
Great, I'm gonna go ahead and just talk a little bit about the video. If you need more time, feel free to send a chat over to Mark, and then this will help us just pace out the process as we're watching these examples. So 70% actually, I stand corrected, 70% of you answered that you were inspired to take action, which is great. 26% of you said no, and 4% of you said, I don't know. I don't know, I totally understand, because sometimes if it's not an issue that resonates with you, or you don't feel that that action is obtainable, you want to participate, but it's not really the best idea. The no, I could also see, I think there are some spots here where I don't know if I agree with the action that they're asking to take, because I'm not sure how designing a new Tzedakah box will really help the world. So, you know, it can be seen from all sides and angles. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just conversation. What I really love about this video are a couple things. I want to take a minute to dissect it. One is they have a very concrete ask. They're inspiring people to action. They're talking about how it's not just changing the world through money, but the way in which we do it, and that this is something new and modern, and it's not just a box. I think what I also love is that they're talking about money, and essentially they're talking about donations and charity, but they're not directly asking for money, which when I started watching it, I thought was going to be the call to action. I also love that they interweave an element, a theme element in here that I'm really curious if anybody saw, which is the idea of the world. The organization is American Jewish World Service, and they talk about how they show images of the world, and that giving is different now, and it's not just to our local community. And they show different currencies at the beginning and different ways that it's spelled out, and there's this thematic element of the world without pushing it down our throats. I also wanted to show this example. I pulled another one that I had earlier because I think this is something that everyone can do. It's very simple production value. They had different Tzedakah boxes, they had some currency, they had an iPad that they wrote different things on. The way that this was filmed was each of these little boxes, each of the top boxes and the bottom, and then in post-production, they sewed them together. So they only needed one camera angle, one set of hands, a couple different boxes, another idea of how to put text, some simple music, and that was it. And a voiceover and a good script. It always comes down to the script. So I really want to encourage you to think out of the box, and how can your visuals speak for you with the voiceover. The voice video is American Jewish World Service. It's not someone who's benefited from their services. It's from an organizational standpoint. And I just want to walk down the goal in the audience and action and distribution so we can see how the messaging played in here. The goal was to get people to participate in Tzedakah, or to say what it looks like. The audience to me really looks like the Jewish community at large, particularly artists or other educators. The action again is very clear and simple. Tell us what it looks like. And their distribution was online for this. Very clear, very concise. So moving along, my slide doesn't want to change. Okay. Another thing to think about is making your video authentic. This is one point of storytelling that always trumps production value and quality. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times I'll do a consultation, someone say, I don't know how to use my camera, I can't get it to look so good, the lighting wasn't great. But this is where I would say to you, content's king. If that story you're telling is authentic, if the person who's speaking can say something that someone else can't, if the framing's a little dark or the camera's a little shaky, it's okay. By no means am I encouraging you to go out and do that, but I think it's important to think about how your characters can shine through. A real moment and genuine emotion are truly powerful. If you try to fake it, your audience will know it instinctively that that's not right, and you'll lose them. This also was mentioned in the first webinar, and it should be true in all of your communication efforts, but in video, it really puts an emotional hook on. This example I'm going to show is a video that we worked on with the Greater Chicago Food Depository in Chicago. They were making an annual report, and it was video driven. And at C3, we produced 4 kind of more polished pieces that talked about different programs, but we really wanted to get an authentic angle in there. So they have this program called the Lunch Bus that drives around underserved areas in Chicago, and they distribute food to kids when they're not in school, because it's a big time for kids to go hungry because the schools aren't providing lunch meals. And they had an intern on the bus. So we said, hey, do you think the intern would be willing to document what they're doing? And they talked to him and he said, sure. So we gave him a little mini recorder, and every day he kept a little kind of audio diary of what he saw and experienced. And then we gave him a regular shoot and point camera to take photos of some of the kids to marry with his audio. And so out of I think he had 15 different journal entries and about 300 photos, we produced this video. And Mark is going to send that link out. Again, it's a little under 2 minutes, so we'll give you about 2.5 minutes to view it.
Today is Thursday, July 14th. We served about 419 meals. I'm specifically the intern for the South Suburban route on the lunch bus program. The purpose of this program is to feed kids in underserved neighborhoods who don't get lunches that they would normally get in school. The lunch bus is focused specifically on children, and that's great because, you know, we get direct interaction with the kids. I spent a lot of time with one girl named Ariana who had a sister named Princess, and I love seeing them every day because they're always, you know, cheerful, always, you know, coming up to me. They used to live in Brookfield. They were forced to move to Chicago Heights because their parents were having problems, and it's really sad to see that, you know, such good kids. Before the internship, I really took things, you know, for granted. I always knew that there was a need, but I never really thought about it until I came here to the food depository, and I really saw firsthand these kids hungry, these kids that need food. The mission of the Greater Chicago Food Depository is unbelievable, and, you know, I want to be a part of this mission.
All right, so 50% of you have voted, or a little over 50%, and 100% of you said that this story is definitely authentic. As I'm sure you saw when I was talking about production value and quality, his audio is not super crisp. It's a little hard to hear. The photos aren't always perfect looking. You know, what he's saying is raw, and you can hear in his voice some hesitation or how he wants to frame what he's talking about. And it's great. I mean, we produce these other videos, and I think this one got the most hits because it truly paints a picture for what they do on the ground through a voice for someone who's a volunteer and isn't stuck in the muck on the organization's priorities. So again, I love this example because it's something that all of you can do. Everyone can pick up, everyone can get someone to record some voiceover. Giving them time to think about it. I think also what made this video very successful is that we didn't just say, sit down and tell us about what it was like volunteering at the lunch bus, and that his story was always in the past tense. Here his story is in the present tense. Today I was hanging out with this girl, or I've been hanging out with her sister a lot and I had to move here because of this. He had time to let it develop and develop relationships. I think one roadblock when working with alumni is everything is in the past, and we don't always have things to show in the present. So how do we overcome those hurdles? So it's just one thing to think about. I don't necessarily have one answer to that, but that is something we could definitely talk about on a consultation, or you should bring to the table. Your teams. Okay. Moving along, actually one other thing I want to point out, that the music with that was a good choice too, because I thought it was mixed a little high where you heard too much of the music, but it was kind of happy. It's a very sad subject matter, but it kept people engaged because it had a good It was like, GCFD is here to help. We're gonna bring solutions. It was a positive spin where if the subject himself would have edited the video, it might have been a different choice. So that was a mirroring of voices. So moving along, another way to tell a good story is to make it personal. Most effectively when it creates a sense of identification between the viewer and the people in the story. People connect to people, right? We connected to David in his story. As a result, we need to be careful to make sure that stories just aren't always about ideas, programs, or policies, but about the people who personify them. This video example that I'm going to show is called This Israel, although Israel is spelled I-S-R-E-A-L, so is real. It's not really supposed to be spelled that way, but it was a clever take on what Israel is to him. There's been a lot of sharing that happened of this video. It came out, I think, about a year ago. It doesn't really need to say anything at all, but what the video does is the filmmaker lets you into how he feels about diversity in Israel. The runtime of this video is 4 minutes long. It would be great if we can all watch about 3 minutes of it, and then you can go back and watch the rest of it. I would like to cut you off at 2 minutes, but there is this one that you'll miss to talk about, so we're just going to watch it. So let's watch it, and then we'll go through and talk about it some. Mark will send the link out. Okay, so the poll question was, did this video evoke emotion for you? Two-thirds of you said yes, and a third of you said no, or I can't decide. You know, emotion, positive, it can be negative. It's just a sense of feeling. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. But when I saw this, I had an emotion, and actually it was an emotion that I couldn't decide. I think part of me felt like I was suffocating in the fact that I want to go back to Israel. I long to go there. It's such a beautiful place. But then there's other images and that siren noise, and I'm like, ugh, this is always what I'm hearing, and why is he focusing on this? So, but there's no argument that this isn't personal. This is someone's opinion, and this is what they see, and this is through their eyes. So how did he do this? Well, again, he shot on a camera. He shot on a DSLR Canon 7D. Some of you, I believe, had for the last videos. He thought a lot about types of imagery and shot sizes. Wide shots, someone's whole body and the landscape. He has a lot of close-up details of the person. I think they're doing something with the sticks and the Star of David. It's been a while since I've watched that part. And then you have these like shots of people's faces, shots and shots of animals, and there's a variety of what he's showing. What he also does, and this is that he audio throughout. There's the music, but there's also the sound, the call to prayer, and the sound of bells, and the sound of driving. The audio he's using isn't necessarily the audio that's going on at the moment. He's creating those layers in post-production, which we talked about in the post-production webinar last time, and anyone can go back and watch. And we have a question.
No, this is the feedback why she wouldn't have watched it.
Oh. So we did have a comment that, yeah, that one person thought the video was annoying and it was too choppy, and another person thought it was very powerful, and that the tempo and how the volume increases evokes emotion. And I would have to agree with both of those depending on your personality type. So it's funny how video can also be subjective, and that's why audience is so important to think about. I think this video works really well for a younger person because of the pacing. But the pacing is very key in post-production as well. This was also edited in Sony Vegas, if you were curious. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. And storytelling, be the moon. What does that mean? It's often better to tell stories of your work's impact, or to hear people outside of your organization or school talking about how great you are, than to hear how great you are. Let your constituents, your alumni, your teachers, be the sun. Like the moon, you can bask in the reflective light more than radiate in your own. So this video that we're going to look at does that very thing. This video is about David, his job of making watches, but it really is about so much more. The video was produced by Etsy Handmade, which is an online website where artists and craft makers and people who fix antiques, anything really, shirt makers, can sell their products and not have to go through a larger distributor. So Mark's going to send the link out, and then I want to talk about the production of the video and also a little bit about the story he's telling and how it links to Etsy.
I think in general there's a reaction against digital technologies. They don't seem very personal, and they don't seem very different from each other, and I think people are looking for something that's different. There's definitely a relationship between the person who wears a mechanical watch and the watch itself, because you are winding it, you're giving something to the relationship and you're getting something back again. I'm David Sokosh, and I'm the owner of Brooklyn Watches. I owned an art gallery in Dumbo, Brooklyn, and it was doing fairly well, but With the recession, people just stopped buying work. I couldn't afford to keep the business going, and so I closed it in February of 2008. A friend of mine was starting the Brooklyn Flea, and I started selling things at the flea market because I didn't have a job. I started selling just vintage items, and it quickly morphed into buying antique clocks and restoring them and then selling them. And that led to the founding of Brooklyn Watches, where I'm taking vintage watch movements and creating new wristwatches. All of the watches that I'm making are powered by vintage Swiss pocket watch movements, and I'm finding them one at a time in older pocket watches. In general, there's a line of about 10 watches that are always available or are available within a 6-week period as I gather vintage parts that make a specific model. I'm surely not in competition with Rolex or Patek Philippe or Cartier. You know, I'm not offering those kinds of products, but the idea of a watch that's assembled by a person who's standing in front of you and can talk to you about it mechanically is attractive. I think that there are lots and lots of people making things in America. You don't hear about it very much, and the news is always full of jobs being lost and jobs being sent away, and that's true, but I think there still is a lot of manufacturing going on, and it's great to be part of that. I'm really happy that I have found this niche that I am filling. At the moment, I'm not employing anybody else, but this company is certainly employing me, which is excellent.
Okay, so 60% of you have voted. The question was, what does this video promote? And the choices were restoration of vintage watches, handmade American products, Etsy, or Brooklyn watches. Really, it promotes all of it. Again, it's not a trick question, but I'm just curious where people found the themes and the storytelling here. Handmade American products and Etsy go hand in hand. Etsy is about handmade products in America that aren't large, that are crafts. He never once had to say, because of Etsy, I'm successful. Or, if it wasn't for Etsy, I don't know, I would have restored watches. You get it. This guy uses Etsy. He employs himself. He lives and breathes what Etsy represents. And all we see is an opening and end card and see the videos produced by them. And so, therefore, Etsy was the moon, basking in the light of the sun. So, also, I think what I really love about this video is so much more than that. It's simple. It's one person. It's one activity. It's authentic. He's him. I mean, look at that mustache. It's great. It's personal. Also, the production value here is great. The cinematographer really knew what he was doing. But again, you can produce this. Let's say hypothetically you have an alumni, or let's say you're a day school and you have an alumni that's in high school now and they're an artist. And they have a great story about how they remember taking macaroni noodles and you know, designing macaroni noodles in first grade or something, or decorating Elijah's cup. And they could tell that story, but while they're talking, you can see their hand drawing something new and sophisticated. You can see them, you can really emotion and feel the emotion rather than just have them talking in the past. So find a particular situation that is your alumni to become who they are and let that speak for you. What to avoid. I only have one example here. I could talk days and days and days about what to avoid. I can send lots more examples. Perhaps I'll post some to the AVI CHAI website. But I just chose this one because at first glance it seems like a good video because it has a nice shot. Like focus, the background's out of focus. It's what we're used to seeing in television. But the content is just there. So we want to avoid stories and give too much information. Limited amount of B-roll that shows what's going on. If you don't have access to B-roll, let's say your strategy, the way you want to get involved, is to have them do a video using the camera on their laptop or their computer, just talking about one moment they really enjoyed as an alumni. And then you're going to make a mosaic on your website and you can see all the different voices. That's okay, that's great, but that's short. It's one question that they're answering, and it's a clip. This has very limited perspective to it. So this video is, again, more of a traditional testimonial approach. It's very long, it's 4 minutes. I really only want you to watch 1.5 minutes of it. So go ahead, Mark, send the link out, click through, let's watch it, and then I'm gonna have everybody come back.
ModCloth is about democratizing fashion. It's taking the direction of fashion out of the hands of an elite group and putting it back in the hands of the consumers. My name is Jay Palat. I'm a 2004 graduate of the MSIT program, and I'm a senior software architect for ModCloth. Started by Eric and Susan Koger. Susan had started the company to fulfill her love of vintage clothing. So she was purchasing lots of vintage things and had more clothes than she could actually use. So she turned it into a business, selling the great finds that she discovered to people over the internet. My job at ModCloth is a senior software architect. My goal is to help the development teams come up with innovative solutions faster. We use a lot of different services. We are a very social company. We're oriented towards things like Facebook, Twitter. We do lots of contests, build strong community ties across these different things. There's the ModCloth blog, where we give our take on fashion and what's going on today. Community has been really huge for ModCloth. I mean, we're really a very community-centric organization. A lot of what we do is spread by word of mouth, both physically and in the virtual world. One of our big programs right now is Be the Buyer. The goal of Be the Buyer is to help ModCloth decide what should we be selling. And so it uses the community to come in, take a look at a set of outfits and decide what should ModCloth be doing. The exposure to so many good people. I mean, I think the classes I took there were top notch. The professors were excellent. I got a lot of depth from the different topics they were talking on. They were always very friendly and helpful to talk to, so if you had questions or wanted to continue conversations, they were always there to support you and kind of feed that along. The rich mix of people who were there from academia and from business, so there was a lot of professors and students who were out there professionally as well, so not just in academia.
Okay, so 68% of you voted. The poll question was, how much of this video would you 25 and 45 seconds and 90 or 12 seconds? The majority of you or the entire video, I'm sorry. Over half of you said 45 seconds, 12% said entire, another 12% said 90 seconds, and then so by and large we're at the 40 seconds, like the 40-second mark, which is really interesting to me because it takes 40 seconds to get into the video till you know what he does, till he starts talking about his job. 45 seconds of the video, I don't know if it is, he states that he's an alumni, which you can get from a title card. He states his name, which you can get from a title card. He states his job title, which you can get from a title card. You don't actually have to hear him say it. And then he talks about what ModCloth is, but he's not the founder of ModCloth. And what ModCloth does is very interesting, but I think for what he does, it's not really relevant for all of us to know that. It also has limited perspective because it's only talking to people that are interested in that field. So it's not bad. There are a lot of good things about it. It is a good testimonial. His job is great. He paints a great face for the school, for sure. But it is limiting, and they're going to lose their viewers right away with information they could have communicated in 10 seconds. So just things to think about. Also with the limited B-roll, there was a question what B-roll is, and B-roll is the secondary footage you see. What held our attention on the last video we saw about David the watchmaker was that we saw him working on his watches, and that's called B-roll. We're seeing what he's doing while he's working at the same time. In real life, those actions aren't happening together. So I'm going to move along. I'm going to go a little quickly here, just because we're running out of time. So now that you've had, or we've seen examples of stories, you need to produce your video. It's all fine and dandy to sit there and answer your questions of what's your goal, who's your audience, what's your action you want them to take, how are you going to distribute it, who's going to tell your story, what kind of story you're going to tell, but you still got to produce it. So to learn more about production, meaning what kind of cameras to use, how to get good shots, what you should think about shooting, you should check out our other webinar around production here on the screen, and Mark will also send it out. To learn more about what's called post-production, which is where the story comes together in the editing process, there is another webinar that Mark will send a link to. We also have on the Jewish Day School Video Academy website a bunch of links to additional resources, and we're also available for consultation. And then distribution, the same, how to get it out there. There's going to be more of an in-depth distribution webinar in a few weeks. They'll talk more about alumni specifics, but if you just want to know some general background about distribution, check out the link that Mark's going to send out. So a few takeaways, and just to make sure I define these a little further for anyone on the call who has not produced a video yet. Pre-production is what happens before production. Production's the shooting, the actual interviews. Pre-production is everything that happens beforehand. So everything we talked about was story, but also prepping for that production. So we said define your story, contacts your pre-interviews, and select characters, which I talked about at the beginning. You need to build a schedule. These take time to make, and they don't happen overnight. So make sure not only that you have the time, but you have the right resources lined up. If you're going to script it, who's going to write the script? Who's going to film it? Who's in charge of the project from start to finish? Who's going to edit it? Or if it's all you, which it might be, it's very highly possible it's just one person, that you carve out enough time in your schedule to allow your video to flourish and grow. You want to look at your locations, know where you're going to be shooting. You want to create a shot list. Again, the shot list is all that footage we are seeing that wasn't the person talking. So wide shots, medium shots. You want to write strong interview questions. You never want to ask questions that are yes or no, but questions that really provoke insight and thought. And again, determine your crew and your gear. Assign roles. And I apologize, I'm zipping through these, but there really is a lot more information in those other webinars. Production takeaways. So once you've established everything and you know you're going to be filming one day, you got to go and film it. Practice makes perfect. Become familiar with your gear. Don't take your camera out of the box. Like, don't buy the camera, have it sit on your shelf, and then the day you go and film, take it out of the. You have to know how to set your white balance, how to get audio, how to hold a steady shot. Practice with friends and family. Have your interview your own kids. Something that just makes you feel comfortable, so you're not having to think so hard about it, and you can enjoy the moment and be there with your subjects. Make sure when you're doing an interview, it's in a quiet location. Remember the rule of thirds when framing an interview. This applies across the board. If you're not familiar with the rule of thirds, Wikipedia is a great resource. Again, setting your white balance. When you're shooting any secondary footage or B-roll, hold the shot for 10 seconds so you have enough video to work with in post-production, which we talk a lot about in the other webinars. The biggest key I can give you today is audio is sometimes more important than image. Make sure to always pay attention to your good, strong, solid audio, whether it's a location or a person talking. But most people cannot watch a video with bad audio. I'm going to zip through these basic post-production takeaways. Again, editing takes time, storytelling takes time, video takes time, products. So I just made this estimate here, but 30 to 40 hours of edit time in your schedule. consultations people just said, I ran out of time. And they weren't realistic. They thought they could sit down and the computer could do everything right away, but there's technical errors, there's just, it takes time. So 30 to 48 hours is a good estimate for about a 1 to 2 minute video. Organization is key. Make sure you version everything, label all your files and your clips and your photos, and you know where to find them. Make sure that you have a backup of all your files on an external hard drive and don't leave them on your desktop where someone could accidentally delete them. Or video files are really large, so it will take up a lot of your hard drive space on your computer, which you want to do. If your video is going to be interviewed based, creating transcriptions will help you. Determining a look and feel in advance is very important to think about in post-production. How when I talk about that last example we saw, how the subject said his name and he was alumni and what year, how all that could have been done with text. You can determine that up front. And then follow process. With time, it takes so much time because of the process. You want to do an assembly, a rough, a fine cut, and a final cut, which gives you time to allow to make it perfect, because the first time you sit down to edit, you're going to have a lot of stuff to go through and probably where to start. So again, this is a little at. Please go and watch the other webinar on post-production and look at the resources on the Video Day School Academy website. Today, I want you to get started. I want you to set up a meeting with your team to figure out your messaging. Audience, who are you speaking to? The action you want to take. Distribute it. We already had some people brainstorming with us on the chat window, which was great. And determine your story. I'm not saying you have to walk away with a character today, but about who you might want to pre-interview, might be good messages. But don't think about that until you know what your messages are. It's a two-step process. And then number 3, book those pre-interviews and plan out an ideal timeline. There's lots of things happening in the school year. There's lots of things happening personally in our lives. So just make sure you allow the right amount, an appropriate amount of time to make a strong video. And that is it for the storytelling webinar today. I really appreciate you staying on, paying attention, watching the examples, talking with me. And I look forward to also sign up for a consultation and talk about what your story ideas are, and also help you through any production questions you might have, even though we're not doing specific webinars for those. Help. The next webinar that we're going to have is the Alumni Outreach Tactics and Tools. It's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern on September 12th. So you can sign up for that or register at the website. Again, sign up for our one-on-one consultations. We have a great team. You would either speak with myself, our producer Tristan Hansen, our executive producer Danny Alpert when it comes to video. And then you can also go and learn about the $30,000 of awards and incentive prizes we'll be giving away during the video contest, which is awesome. So thank you everyone again, and I look forward to seeing what stories you have to share with us.